I'm Mark Caro, and welcome to episode 27 of Caropop. Our guest this week is Terry Chambers, the man who provided the motor behind XTC until the band quit touring. He was the drummer on XTC's first 5 albums as this band from Swindon, England, evolved from a skittish, quirky, new wave outfit to a showcase for Andy Partridge's and Colin Moulding's increasingly tuneful and sophisticated songwriting. He's the one driving the manic beat of such early XTC singles as Science Friction, This Is Pop, and Statue of Liberty, as well as the start-stop rhythms of Neon Shuffle, one of Partridge's many would-be dance tunes. The band took a major evolutionary leap on its third album, 1979's Drums and Wires. Guitarist Dave Gregory, who starred in Caropop Ep27-Terry, replaced keyboardist Barry Andrews, Partridge's and Moulding's songs got stronger, and Steve Lillywhite offered sharp, punchy production in which Chambers' drumming burst from the speakers. His thundering drums kick off the album and the band's breakthrough single, Moulding's Making Plans for Nigel, as Chambers inverts what he plays on the floor tom and hi-hat. Black Sea from 1980 was the sound of a band clicking on all cylinders, with Chambers a beast on No Language in Our Lungs and Paper and Iron. He also finesses the shifting time signatures of Burning with Optimism's Flame and whips up a sonic storm in the climactic Travels and Neolon. There's also a healthy serving of the band's beloved Pea Soup beat on Generals and Majors. XTC added textures and ambition to 1982's English Settlement. Chambers supplies memorable fills to Partridge's greatest song to date, Senses Working Overtime, and plays around-the-world rhythms on It's Nearly Africa and Melt the Guns. The latter of those is not his favorite. The band set out to tour this album, but just before a show in Los Angeles, Partridge informed his bandmates that he couldn't go on. The tour and XTC's dates as a live band were over, and this cancellation put the band members behind a financial 8-ball that you may find shocking when Chambers discusses it. Chambers had enjoyed studio work, but says he lived for touring. So when XTC reassembled with a new producer, Steve Nye, to record its next album, Mummer, Chambers was not in the best frame of mind. He recorded 2 songs that wound up on the album, and while working on another one, he walked. He left not only the band, but also the country, moving to Australia with his wife. There he stayed for more than 30 years, playing briefly with another band before retreating from the music industry altogether. Yet in 2016, he was back in Swindon, and soon he and Colin Moulding were recording an EP of Moulding songs under the banner TC and I. They played 6 shows in Swindon in late 2018, and then Moulding pulled the plug on the project. Chambers responded by planning his own tour, teaming up with TC and I guitarist and singer Steve Hilling to form the band EXTC. Chambers says Partridge not only gave his blessing, but helped name the band. Moulding may not have been so thrilled. This EXTC is currently wrapping up a North American tour, showcasing not only XTC songs on which Chambers originally played, but also later ones such as Earn Enough for Us, The Mayor of Simpleton, and King for a Day. So now you can hear his imprint on those songs. I spoke with Chambers at his hotel before EXTC's show last week at City Winery, Chicago. We set up just off the lobby so you can hear some rainy day bustle in the background, but the main attraction is Terry Chambers. He is good-humored, unpretentious, and revealing in his telling of what it was like to be in and then out of XTC. Does he feel like Partridge's breakdown might have been handled differently now? What actually prompted his leaving the band? Did he seek out or even hear XTC songs afterward? What was he doing during his 3 decades away from music? And now that all 4 key XTC members are living in Swindon once again, who is the biggest obstacle to an XTC reunion? As Chambers showed on stage, he still has the feel and power to play those XTC songs. Please enjoy Terry Chambers on Caropop. So the way you learned playing drums, and whoever it was that you sort of idolized from those drummers back then, whether it was John Bonham or whoever else, then you're in XTC and the versions of it before that. Were you playing in a style that you had kind of learned or planned to play, or did you have to sort of play in a different style because it was sort of punk and everything was very sort of, fast and, herky-jerky and that sort of thing?
It wasn't a particular style that I'd learned and grew up with. I think it sort of lent itself really to the times, which was 77. Andy certainly was riding in that style, because in order to get gigs at the time, those were the type of bands that the pubs and clubs in England were sort of booking, especially in London. And you sort of felt that in order to get those gigs, you were obliged to play that type of music. So I think all of us adapted our personal styles to the times. So we did change slightly.
So XTC when you started versus XTC by the time you left, did it feel like two different bands?
I guess in a sense, yeah. The songwriting certainly had progressed. As you mentioned earlier, Mark, on the third album, there was commercial success in a single form, making plans for Nigel in particular. So, I mean, and Virgin Records were desperate for that. I mean, we were actually on the edge at that point because we'd recorded 2 albums without any single success. And when it came to the third one, it was like, they were sort of like looking at us thinking, we want to hit a single out of this, otherwise we might sort of be consider ripping up this contract, which was a 6-album contract. So the pressure was really on at that point. And at that point, that's where Barry Andrews left the band, not because of that, because we were unaware of it at the time, but decided that in order to get a better outlet for his own material, he sort of decided he wanted to leave the band. Enter Dave Gregory.
Right. So what was do you think the bigger change in the band at that time? Because it seems like there were 2. One was Dave Gregory joined, so you have like a really complimentary guitar player who also can play all these leads and stuff while Andy's doing his, kind of scratchy rhythm stuff. And then you also have Steve Lillywhite coming in as a producer. So like, is it sort of the combination of those two? Like, which made the bigger impact, do you think?
Well, absolutely. I think well, in fairness, probably Dave. I mean, he sort of stabilised the thing. He was the only reader amongst us, and he stabilised the situation and started softening the thing a little bit, I guess, and making it a little bit more sort of acceptable to the ear. As you say, the itchy, scratchy type of thing there was mellowed out. And once again, I think with the help of Steve Lillywhite and Hugh Padgham, there was 3 new elements into the equation, which drastically sort of changed our sound, and we achieved some commercial success as a result of that. Plus, obviously, the songwriting had improved.
Right. Do you think that Andy was sort of miffed or got his competitive spirit up when he's the main songwriter and leader of the band, and then Colin, who sort of came to songwriting later, all of a sudden is writing the hits?
Yeah, I think that came as a little bit of a shock to him. But then again, it was a band, and you sort of got to play to your strengths. So I don't think it sat particularly well with Andy, no.
Dave Gregory was telling me about making plans for Nigel and the decision to experiment with sort of mixing up, like where you play the hi-hat part on the snare, the drums, and the other, like sort of reversing what you would normally play on which drum.
That's right, because if you actually play that pattern in the normal fashion, what I'm playing on the right hand, if you play that on the hi-hat, it would sound pretty, it would say do that. Right. But because you changed that around and you're actually playing that pattern on the floor tom, and you're playing the hi-hat with the left hand, which you would normally be playing the other way around, it sounds very complicated. But all you're doing is actually sort of like just going like that.
Right.
And it's just a different approach. Well, you can't see what I'm doing exactly, but I'm just
switching hands.
Switching arms from one side to the other. That's about as simple as I can make it. Once again, you've still got to play the thing, I guess, but really it was just a simple pattern, just looked at differently.
Right. And was that Andy's suggestion that you play it that way? And was it something that you were originally like, hey, that's a great idea, or did you think, what?
Well, it was a combination of things. Andy was listening to Devo at the time, and he really liked the way they approached their drums. He also liked a band called Can as well, German outfit. So if you look at those 2 bands and listen to that, it was certainly a move away from the punk thing as such. It was sort of like going off in a different out. Not that Can were punk, don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about the electronic side of things and a similarity, the Kraftwerk thing, Can, Devo, that type of thing. Andy was very interested in that. I mean, he didn't want to turn us into that band, but it's just a question of looking at, I mean, the way they approached Satisfaction, a Rolling Stones song,
Right.
for example, they just took another turn on it, and Andy really liked that. So there's a fair amount of credit got to go to that band there for the way that turned out, I guess. And we were happy, Colin and I and Dave, to explore these possibilities. And then in the end we said, yeah, actually that sounds okay. So really it was sort of an experimental to a certain extent, but wanting to make things a little bit more interesting rather than just doing the run-of-the-mill four on the floor type thing and that sort type of approach.
In general, how were you coming up with your parts? Would Andy or Colin play their songs and you just sort of play along and find it, or did Andy say, I want you to play this particular beat?
Basically, when they come up with a song, they would come up with a song and it would just be played on acoustic guitar or a guitar and just sing the thing and strum the chords through. The rest of the band would find out what key the thing was in, and I would always start these things the same, just keeping standard time, which would be hi-hat, snare and bass drum, and it would all just get the feel of the thing. And then the song would develop depending on what the subject matter was. If it was, if they had an industrial feel about it, or if it was a love song, heaven forbid, or it was about buildings or something like that. I tried to approach it, and we all did say, look, how can we make this sort of feel as if, the drums actually fit the lyrics of the song? And I think we sort of tried to work on that a little bit. As you say, Paper and Iron and those type of songs, I think we tried to imply that it had some sort of relevance with the lyrics to the song.
Right. Paper and Iron, you're walloping those drums. I mean, that's a really fierce
that's a song that we're not playing on this particular tour, but the guys have mentioned it. And as I say, it's been difficult searching out what to play because there's an enormous amount of material there, and what's possible to play, because later on in the XTC songwriting and recording career, they didn't have to worry about replicating this in a live situation. So they basically threw the kitchen sink at some of these things, as listeners would probably well know. In the EXTC band that I've put together, it's more of a rock band, and what we're doing is not trying to replicate this stuff, but do a air version of this thing with 4 musicians. I mean, it wouldn't make sense for us to go out, financial sense anyway, to go out with perhaps a 10-piece band or a 15-piece band there with a brass section in order to do these things absolute justice from a point of view of replicating the album. So we're cutting to the quick a little bit with this, but it's up to the people that come along to see this and make up their own mind as to whether we're making a fist of it or not.
Well, when you were in XTC, it was a 4-piece band, so it makes perfect sense for you to be touring with EXTC as a 4-piece band as well. I mean, it's interesting that you're doing this. Nick Mason is touring his Saucerful of Secrets band, which is it's Pink Floyd stuff before Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, did you consider just sort of doing I'm just going to do the era of XTC until I was on it and just sort of skip everything after that you weren't on?
No, I don't think that was a thing. I mean, Steve Tilling and I got involved with Colin Moulding. We did this TC&I project,
right,
which originally Colin was doing this solo record, and then when I went to England there, because my brother's eldest daughter was getting married and I was invited over for the wedding, and I bumped into the guys during that period of time, Colin told me what he was doing. He said, look, would you be interested in perhaps playing on this? And I hadn't played for some time, and I thought, I was going through a bit of a marital problem as well at the time, and I thought perhaps this would be good therapy for me. So I said, I would be. I said, if I'm capable of doing this, let's give it a go. And that's what we did, and I ended up playing a couple of songs on an EP with Colin, and we sort of collaborated on the thing in as much that we sort of shared the name rather than it being his solo thing. And we released that. And then he, to my surprise, suggested that would we put a band together and see what these things sounded like in a live situation, which surprised me. And he wanted to basically play some of the songs that he'd recorded after we finished playing live. He wanted to hear what they sounded like live. So we put a set together predominantly all his songs, and we just played Statue of Liberty, one of Andy's songs, to just make sure that there was no ill feeling about it. But Colin really wanted to hear his songs in the live situation, and that's what we did.
Right.
After he decided that he didn't want to play live anymore, we only played about 6 gigs, which was very disappointing to Steve and I, because we put a lot of work into it. We decided to continue on with this and say, look, I think we should see if we can put a band together ourselves and not only do Colin songs, but play a lot of Andy's songs as well. So we ended up balancing the thing out about 50-50. So that's where we're at.
So when Colin ended the TC and I thing, were you surprised? Because did you think you were going to maybe bring that over here? Or?
Well, I was surprised. I knew he didn't want to get back on the extensive touring thing there, but I thought that we would keep the thing together there and do some shows, periodically. So I was very disappointed that didn't continue on. Yeah.
So now both of them, Colin and Andy, both told you, hey, guess what? We're not touring anymore. So you've had it. You went through that twice.
Yeah, that's right.
But this time you actually picked up and you said, well, I'm just going to do this anyway.
The difficulty being, Mark, that Steve and I were committed to this thing all the way. It was getting 2 other like-minded musicians that could spend the time interested in playing the music, and all the other difficulties about putting a band together, because it's a bit of a stretch doing these American things here, and you have to have a little bit of backbone in order to do it.
Right.
So not only be a good musician and want to do these things, and it took us 2 years, basically, I think, to get the band together that we've ended up with, which involves Steve Hampton on guitar and Matt Hughes on bass. And those guys are sound.
Did you have to get Andy's and Colin's blessing to do this, or? Not
really. I was a little bit disgruntled that Colin decided to just sort of drop this, and really that made me even more determined in a sense.
Right.
And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to stop at that. And I thought
TC without I.
Yeah. So there was a little bit of to and fro as to what we would be called, and Andy said, well, if you're going to go out and you're going to put my songs in there, because I said to him, I said, look, I want to go out there and play these things, especially sort of your songs as well that people haven't heard for 40 years. And he said, well, I couldn't be happier, and you can't call it really anything other than XTC. Being my initials being TC,
right,
and the EX being sort of, so that's why there's a little bit of a gap. So people can assimilate with the original band, but also if you look at it, it's XTC.
EX,
type of thing. So
TC.
It's a little bit tangled, but that was his idea, and I thought, well, if he suggested that, who am I to argue about that? So I thought that was probably a good idea in connecting the whole thing together. I don't think Colin was particularly happy with it, or Dave, because it was a little bit too close. But at the end of the day, they're going to get some royalties out of it, or Colin will anyway, so perhaps that'll ease the burden.
When was the last time you had actually sort of done a rock tour before this?
I played in Australia there sometime after I finished with XTC, and that was pretty much a mercenary thing there, just to keep food on the table, really. I played that for 18 months, 2 years in Australia with a band called Dragon. I did an album with them. In actual fact, I only played on, they'd already started recording that thing. I only played on about 4 songs on the album, but I did a full live album with them too, recorded at the Sydney Entertainment Centre in Australia. But once again, I was a bit of a hired gun, and I was always used to sort of being in a band with mates.
Right.
And I was always the odd man out, because they were a band from New Zealand and had been together for about 10 years. So there was all these in-jokes and all this sort of stuff, and I had no idea what the hell they were talking about half the time. But so that was that side of it.
How long had it been, though, since you were really sort of in drumming shape to do this kind of a tour when you started up again recently?
Well, it was probably 30 years, probably. So,
that's a while.
I just sort of went into the rock and roll wilderness, and well, thankfully, Colin put this thing together, and it gave me a reason to get back into it. And yeah, nobody's more surprised than me that this is actually taking place.
Does it feel just the same as it did to you when you were playing?
Yeah, I think I'm playing better, to be quite honest, because I was young, enthusiastic, and it was more of a visual thing back in the day, where you had to be. Actually, it seemed to me at the time that it was more important to sort of like look as if you knew what you were doing and look as if you were sort of a good player, rather than actually physically being one. Now I'm a bit more relaxed about my playing. And I think I've got a slightly better technique now, which comes with either age or experience, I guess.
How was your playing different by the time you finished with XTC from when you started? Were there any particular things you were doing more later on or less, like you were playing toms more, or you were playing the drum kit in a certain way that you hadn't been playing it before?
Yeah, good question. Not sure how to answer that, really. Once again, I think it's sort of the songs themselves tended to dictate what needed to be played on them, I think, if that answers that question.
Right. Yeah, when I listen to like Black Sea, it seems like it's a band that is totally is clicking on all cylinders. Like you guys are so tight on that album, and something like Burning with Optimism's Flame. I mean, there are like a lot of time signature things that are pretty tricky in there, but you sound totally in sync. Did that feel like sort of a peak to you, and just in terms of the tightness of the band?
Yeah, I mean that was because of the extensive touring we did. We were touring arguably more than any other band at that particular point in time. I mean, I think Dave Gregory would probably be the guy to answer about the amount of gigs that we were doing. I mean, for instance, just before I came away, my old drum roadie said to me that when he last played the United States before the tour that finished it all, I think we did 50 gigs in 65 days, and wow. 10 of those days were travel days, so there was actually physically only 2 days off at that period of time. So that gives you a bit of an indication of the sort of touring schedule that we had. And then you would finish there, go back to the UK, maybe finish for a week or something like that, and then go out for another month, and then there was Europe, and then we go to Japan, then Australia. So for about 5 years this band just worked solidly, and when you weren't doing that, you were expected to write material and then record the material and then get back on the wagon again, and as regards touring. So for 5 years, I mean, that was the point where Andy sort of started to break down. He was overworked, and if he'd had more sympathetic management, they just flogged the horse to death, basically.
Right.
And so, he couldn't see any other way out, because, if we'd have been a bit older, I suppose, a bit more experienced, and the management team would have been a bit more compassionate, we could have sat there and said, listen, we need a bit of a rest from all this, because this guy's he's beat.
So a song like Travels of Neolon, it's this furious loopy, like looped sound, but there's no actual looping involved. Like you're playing through the whole thing, right?
Well, apparently I did that in one take, so Dave Gregory tells me. I mean, He's the man to ask, as you've done that, because
everyone go listen to the Dave Gregory episode. I just basically sort of did what was required, and I thought, well, that's been done now. So, and it was one of those songs that I don't think lend itself to the live situation too much, because I think, it was a magic moment at the time, and it was a lot of things were thrown at that, and I think to replicate that night after night in a live situation would have been a bit of a tall order, to be quite honest. Yeah, you mentioned can. I could hear the can influence on a song like that, where it's very repetitive and droney and and aggressive.
And when Andy sort of came up with the idea, I mean, he would sort of suggest that I want something in this caveman-like fashion, So, I don't know, to me it just naturally lent itself towards that type of thing, just sort of a very repetitive thing. And I think we just sort of nearly made that up, just in a jam, really.
Do you have memory of just various songs, you hearing them or starting to play with them, where you thought, wow, this is great. This is a really great song.
Yeah, I did think that about Senses Working Overtime, actually. That was one of the songs of all the ones that we did. I thought, there's something special about this. because of the changes in it. I thought this is actually a well-crafted song, and I think if people don't like this, I don't know what else to offer.
Right.
You know, I mean, I just had a real gut feeling about that song.
Yeah, it's a great one, and you've got wonderful fills in that one too.
Yeah, once again, I just think it was one of those things that just sort of, especially that sort of like sort of halftime fill at the end that people mention. I think that was just one of those situations where we recorded it several times in order to get it right in the studio, and I think at the end of it that was just a spur of the moment thing.
So you're touring on English Settlement, and in English Settlement also, like as much as, you know, there's sort of this reputation of, oh, you know, Terry Chambers, this hard-hitting bashing drummer. I mean, there's a lot of really complex drumming going on English Settlement. Like I feel like the band's palette really sort of expanded on that, you know, whether it's, you know, stuff that's blatantly, you know, different, like, you know, Melt the Guns or It's Nearly Africa, or just even just like Runaway. I mean, a lot of this stuff, it just sort of feels like it's broadened, you know, what the rhythmically you're doing in the band.
Yeah, in actual fact, I think it's a bit of a misconception that I'm a hard-hitting drummer. I think that's, people get that idea because of the way the drums were actually recorded. It sounds like some sort of animal is hitting these things at times, you know, in some of the more... Because
it's a tremendous drum sound.
Neanderthal style of drumming, but it's the way the thing was recorded. I mean, you know, as you know, with trigger, not that we use triggers, but with triggers and stuff, you can make things sound like anything they like. But I'm not sort of like deliberately going out there thrashing these things to pieces. It's just sort of like a big ambient sound that Hugh and Steve Lillywhite got.
Right.
That people tend to think, wow, he must be bashing the bejesus out of this drum kit in order to get that. But in actual fact, it's all aided by the microphones.
So, and then you're touring on English Settlement, and Andy just has his breakdown and says, we're going to stop.
Yeah.
Like how devastating was that for the rest of the band at that point? And
well, I mean, we did the one gig in San Diego on that tour, and the audience was in the next night we were playing Los Angeles, and the audience were in the auditorium, you know. And it was when we sort of got asked to come down to the lobby to play the gig that the news broke that he wasn't coming out of his room, and he just couldn't cope with it. I don't know. How do you take that? I don't know. You just can't believe what you're listening to. You know, it's like you've just heard some serious bad news about a family member. I can't describe it as anything more than that, really. I mean, the wind's just totally out of your sails. It's, I don't know. It's like you've just heard of a complete disaster somewhere. You know, it's just. You just feel as if you're helpless.
Well, it's interesting. Like that was 40 years ago, which I find hard to believe. But there's a sense that, or hope at least, that by now there's sort of more sensitivity to people going through, you know, mental health struggles and, you know, anxiety and, you know, whatever it was that was going on there.
Yeah.
Do you feel like at that time everyone was sort of prepared to sort of deal with that sort of thing, or was there sort
Absolutely not. I never knew Andy was on Valium at all. And I didn't know about sort of mental health issues. I just thought that he was a bit tired, you know, because we were younger guys then. And as you say, I don't think mental health, people considered it back then. It was just sort of like, you know, pull your sleeves up, you know, have a rest, have a sleep. Get over it type of thing, you know. People, I was totally unaware that it was an illness.
At the time, were you getting more joy in XTC out of performing live or out of making the records?
Always live. I mean, that's the way I sort of began. To me, it was a privilege to go and record albums and one thing another. I never ever sort of, when I started out, I never ever thought that would ever happen. And probably I was ill prepared for it, to be honest, because then you had to sort of, I mean, the beauty of sort of playing live is if you make mistakes, suddenly it's there and it's gone and you get on with it. I mean, that's being human, you know. But when you're in a studio there and a producer's watching every move you make, and we never ever recorded anything to a click track. We did a bit of a tape thing on Melt the Guns, I think it was one thing. But that was never ever to be duplicated live anyway. But other than that, the stuff was always done just as is, and you were under the pressure there to sort of keep your timing nice and consistent, nice and steady, keep your volumes reasonably well, so you didn't have to cause the engineer to sort of like suddenly bring this down and push that up, that's all sort of part of your playing sort of style and technique, and I suddenly become well aware of playing. You had to play this thing like an instrument, for heaven's sake,
right.
Because otherwise these guys would say, well, because they'd all work with decent drummers, and suddenly you're under a bit of pressure there to make sure that whatever you put down, eventually that was going to be there forever. So it's like, if you got to live with this thing, so you want to make sure it's as good as what you can get. So that side of it wasn't enjoyable for me. I just like the spontaneity of just sort of going out and playing live and thinking, well, it's a warts and all situation there, and you have your good nights and your bad nights. But as long as at the end of the day, everybody in the crowd seemed to be having a good time, then it's a moment in time.
So how did you process the end of XTC as a touring band? Did you think at that point, this is going to be it for me because I'm not going to want to be in a band that doesn't tour?
Pretty much so, yeah. I couldn't understand the logic of recording records and not going out and promoting them in the best sense, which traditionally back in those days was expected of you from the record companies. If they gave you the privilege of recording this stuff, who was going to go out and advertise it if you weren't going to go out on the road? And I thought, it's not right to expect somebody else to go out and do that. You need to go out there and do it, because while you're on tour doing that stuff, inevitably there was interviews for radio stations and magazines and newspapers, and people would report on the gigs as well. So, to take that aside of the sales of it, I mean, back in the day, there was no such thing as merchandise, really. You might have had a program, that was about it. I'm sure you can remember that.
Yeah.
Now, merch is a big thing as well.
You get a T-shirt, but it wasn't that expensive anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that might be about the sense of it. So, from a point of view of actually advertising this record that you sort of spent so much time doing, it was a no-brainer for me to think that you're not going to go out and tour this thing? I couldn't understand it. The record company couldn't understand it. The management company couldn't understand it. Yet he thought he was going to sell these records, just sort of make these records, sit at home and get somebody else to do it. I mean,
is there a financial end to that too? Because you're not getting publishing for it; you're just getting recordings, and so you would probably, I assume, you would make up a chunk of your income playing live also.
As a result of the cancelled American tour and all this type of thing, it took me 18 years to pay back from my royalties, which were only mechanical royalties at that time, 18 years to pay my quarter of the debt. And it was nothing to do with me about cancelling it.
So 18 years to the debt of, for the tour, because you guys canceled the tour,
yeah.
It took 18 years for you to pay your part of it.
For me, yeah.
Wow. So that's a pretty devastating decision.
when it wasn't your fault.
Right.
So,
and then you go back.
You can understand why people get. I don't hold no grudge over it. I understand now that it was an illness and all that. Things could have been dealt with a lot better, once I said, with better and more sensitive management. But at the time there, when you sort of get that, and it wasn't until then. Admittedly, they had problems with management after that. I think they went on strike for about 5 years. To get out of their lousy deal with Virgin Records. That was another bad thing. They signed up for I signed up with Virgin Records for a 6-album deal, all at 4%. If we'd have had decent management, they said, listen, let's sign for 2 albums at this, and if the things go reasonably well, it puts us in a better position to renegotiate a better deal.
Right.
That didn't happen.
Yeah. So then eventually you go back into the studio. You don't have Hugh Padgham there anymore. You have, Andy and Colin with their new songs, and you have this sort of still kind of aftermath of canceling all this tour. So what's your state of mind when you go in for those, recording sessions and rehearsals?
Not good. Not knowing that, I didn't think that the songs were good enough to follow English settlement. That was my opinion. I had a conversation with Andy about it, and he rang me and said, listen, if that's the way you feel about it, I'll scrap the lot and start again. And I said to him, no, Andy, this is where you're at, and you want these things recorded now. Because he always wanted to record everything that he did all the time. That's why there was so much music on the English Settlement. I think that should have been a single record.
Which it was in the U.S., although I don't know that they chose the right songs.
That caused some grief too, because he said he wanted to record this stuff and get it all out, because next year I'll have some more stuff. You know what I mean? He was very productive, and he said, I don't want to sort of save any of this stuff for next year because it'd be last year's model.
Right.
You know, done and dusted, so we want to record it all and get it out. You know, I'm not quite sure whether that was commercially a right thing to do or not. And the album could have been a lot stronger, I think, had it been a single album, because there's a few things on English Settlement I think are B grade at best.
All right, what do you take off of English Settlement?
Well, Fly on the Wall's one of them. Is that on there? I'm pretty sure
it's on, although I don't think it's on the American one. So I think they did take that one off. Well, there you go,
but they've taken it off. There's a couple on there. I don't want to get too specific with it, because
I
it gets
saw
a
an
bit
interview
personal.
with you where you said you didn't like Melt the Guns.
I didn't particularly like it.
And you didn't like English Roundabout.
I didn't like that either, no. But they made the record, so, and I think it would have been a stronger record without them. But there you go.
Still a great record, though.
Yeah.
And better than what you think Mummer was becoming.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a better record than Mummer, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, it got to a point there. I played the two there, and as you say, the non-touring thing came up. I thought there was a couple of songs there that were strong. Some of them there I thought were just, I don't know, probably not up to it. I didn't want to be in a position where you sort of, it's difficult sort of like making each record better than the last and all that, but I think, well, perhaps we should have taken a little bit more time between that English Settlement and putting the Mummer thing together and making sure that the songs were better, in my opinion.
Was switching producers to Steve Nye from Hugh Badgham, is that a problem also?
Well, I didn't like it at all, you know. I mean, one of the guys even left during, I forget who it was that left. Yeah, I didn't think it was a good combination. I thought we had, not that you know, you continue on and on. I mean, Mutt Lange should have been producing drums and wires, had it not been for the fact that I think he was doing either AC/DC's Back in Black or Def Leppard's Pyromania at that particular point. He was unavailable. That was our first choice, to try and get Mutt to do it.
For drums and wires.
For drums and wires.
Right. Although Steve Lillywhite, I mean, you guys had a great
we got
collaboration with him on that.
I actually suggested Steve Lillywhite because I liked the Ultravox album.
Right.
And I said he was great. And Hugh Badgham only got involved by luck because he was the resident engineer. So it's just a chance thing that we had Hugh Badgham as the resident engineer. Steve Lillywhite was our producer of choice, you know, because Mutt was unavailable, and we recorded that thing in the Stone Room. So those combinations made that record, really.
Right. And then Steve Lillywhite was not there for English Settlement, so Hugh Badgham was the producer of that. And then he also started making like these huge hit albums with like The Police and Genesis.
His first hit single was Making Plans for Nigel, that he was involved in. And then because of the success of the Black Sea thing as well, and Steve, as you say, wasn't available at that particular point in time, Virgin Records gave us permission to co-produce it with Hugh. So it was sort of like a bit of a feather in our cap. So we, as a band, mainly a Partridge, of course, but as a band, we sort of all had a few hands in on doing that with Hugh. And then once again, the Mummer thing, there we're back to this producer thing again, and arguably a producing team that probably wasn't quite what was right for XTC. Because having said that, of course, we did singles with Martin Russian. We did Are You Receiving Me with him.
Right.
That wasn't particularly successful, but it was a good recording session, great producer in that, because he did the first Stranglers album, which we loved, or I certainly loved. You know, and obviously we did the This Is Pop remake thing with Mutt Lange, and we also did the disastrous Wait Till Your Boat Goes Down with Phil Wainman, who was a great producer, but he was a producer in the old-fashioned sense of, you know, if you can't get it right, I'll go in there and do it for you.
Oh, great.
You know, so it was sort of like he had a big stick.
What was disastrous about that one?
Well, it put me on edge because he was a drummer as well. And it was like, you know, he'd be in there sort of like looking at his watch. How long is it going to take you to do this stuff, you know? And I don't work under pressure particularly well in that sense. So that wasn't very comfortable. And these things had to be done. Look, we've got 12 hours, guys, you know, start to finish. Let's crack on with this. And he was an old a producer from and his track record is excellent. I mean, he did the sensational Alex Harvey band, Faith Healer stuff, and all manner of stuff. Phil Wayman, all pop stuff, and that. So fantastic producer, but ruled with an iron fist.
So Mummer, you're on Beating of Hearts and Wonderland, which are the first two songs. Wonderland being the Colin song that has kind of a, gentle kind of synthy thing going on. Were you on Love on a Farm Boy's Wages or on any version of that? Or
no, I think we got to a point there. I think that was sort of more or less the point where I sort of finished with the band. We were doing a rehearsal there, and I thought, I don't know where this is going. My head's not in the right space here. And I said, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And I think
that was the song that you were doing at the time you walked out? I think that was the song we were rehearsing at the time. I could be, once again, ask Dave Gregory. I'm sure his recollection of this is better than mine, but I'm pretty sure that may or may not, arguably, that is the song that's been named as the song. Right.
But, that was it. But I was in a situation with my to-be wife. She was about to give birth and one thing and another, so there was that consideration. She was Australian. There was that, the non-playing live situation, and I thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do for money. I was just in a bit of a state, to be honest, and I didn't think that. I thought my future was elsewhere.
Was it sort of like a George Harrison "See You Around the Clubs" moment where you're in the rehearsal and you just sort of walked out, or was there a final straw that got you to there? Was there a blow up, or was it just sort of like I'll see you around?
I think I put the drumsticks down. The story goes the cymbals were still waving away as I walked out.
Did you keep in touch with them after that, or was it really like, I'm off to Australia, that's it?
I had a conversation with Andy afterwards, and he said about scrapping these songs, as I mentioned earlier, and I said, no, Andy, I said, it wouldn't be right for me to sort of, this is your work. I said, it's me that should go.
And then you moved to Australia.
Yeah.
So that's a real huge change.
It's sort of like almost akin to joining some religious cult in a bizarre desert somewhere, which possibly it was in my own sense for 30 years.
Did you like living in Australia?
I loved it.
Where in Australia were you?
I was living in a place called Lake Macquarie, which is just south of Newcastle, New South Wales, which is about 2.5 hours drive north of Sydney.
Okay.
Yeah, on the coast. It was beautiful. Yeah, lovely. I had 3 kids there. My son is actually tour managing. First time I've seen him since he came over for 6 years, and he's tour managing this.
That's Kai.
That's.
So he's also a drummer.
Yeah.
Does he drum like you do?
He drums far better than I do.
Well, I look forward to seeing him and meeting him also. So you're in Australia. You've removed yourself from this whole British rock scene and this band that you were in. Are you listening to their albums when when Mummer came out? Did you go pick it up and hear what it sounds like, or were you just like, no, I'm
No, I didn't.
done.
I didn't worry about it. I'd sort of just drawn a line under that. To be honest, I wasn't interested. I was asked after that. I did the Dragon thing in Australia there for 18 months, 2 years, but basically got a little bit disillusioned with the whole record business, to be quite honest. And after that, I was even approached by the band called the Divinals.
I remember them.
Yeah, they asked me if I would be interested in playing with them, but once again I said, I'm not in the right frame of mind to be doing this. Was flattered by the opportunity to play with those guys, Chrissy Amphlett and Mark McKechnie. I didn't think I was in the right frame of mind to sort of make a good contribution in that sense. So I declined that offer, and I just sort of went into the rock and roll wilderness after that, really.
So what was it you were doing when you were not playing drums?
I was just doing manual work, just labouring type work there, just to sort of keep food on the table. Just normal 9 to 5 or 7 till 3 or whatever the hours were out in Australia there. Just outdoor work, really, construction mainly.
So like working on houses, buildings?
That type of thing, yeah. I ended up buying a concrete line pump, actually, and pumping concrete for about 16 years, I guess.
Wow. And would you like have the radio on in the background? I mean, occasionally did you hear any XTC songs?
No, this machine took up too much noise. You couldn't listen to anything other than that. Wow. Just pumping it out.
Do you have memories of like hearing XTC songs after that over the next couple decades?
I never really listened to the radio at all. If I did listen to any music, it would be back in the day. It would obviously be 12-inch vinyl, and later on collected CDs. And I would play Sensational Alex Harvey Band, Thin Lizzy, Deep Purple, those type of things. Right. Led Zeppelin, and all the stuff that I loved as a young chap growing up.
So you're playing newer XTC songs on this tour. So at what point did you sort of go back and think, okay, I better listen to the stuff that they did after I left?
Well, funnily enough, it was during the time I was with Colin, because a lot of that stuff that we did, Dave Maddox played, Pat Mastelotto played.
Right, he was on Oranges and Lemons. Yeah, Dave Maddox was on None Such.
The Prairie Prince,
Skylark,
Chuck Sabo, all these guys. I've probably missed somebody. Pete Phipps as well. All great drummers. And, big shoes to fill. And those guys sort of just went in there and, did their magic. And then suddenly Colin said, well, I'd like to hear these things. So I had to do my interpretation of this stuff. So I learned some of this stuff doing the project with Colin, and I've now moved that into the band that we're in, because Steve Tilling was obviously familiar with that as well. So that's sort of half of the set. But then Steve and I had to sort of come to terms with some of Partridge's stuff. So it was a bit of a challenge, and we decided to work on material that we thought was doable in a 4-piece band, as opposed to
right.
And there's no keyboards in this either. Nobody ever mentioned the whole thing. Since we've been playing this stuff, people saying, hey, this is great, we're enjoying what's going on here. This is a rock band. And nobody said, but there's no keyboards in it. Nobody's mentioned that. So right. It makes me wonder, well, I won't say what it makes me wonder.
So when you listen to this stuff, was there some of it that you liked a lot and some of it that you didn't like so much?
Yeah, there was some stuff that definitely, most of the stuff that we're playing there, I've got great respect for as songwriting and as musicianship of the guys that played on the stuff. As I said, they're all great drummers, those guys. So what are the
sort of later XTC things that you particularly liked?
Well, I like King for a Day. We're doing that.
Right. Another Colin song.
Yeah. What else are we doing? Mayor Simpleton, we're doing that. Earn Enough, we're doing that. Grass, we're doing. Sacrificial Bonfire, we're doing that.
That's not a song I would have pulled out as a obvious live song.
But Colin and
another Colin song, of course.
One of Colin's songs. Colin and I did that, and I really like it.
Yeah.
And we put it in the middle of one of the sets. Grass is in the middle of one set, and Bonfire is in the middle of the other set. And it just sort of, it's just a song in either set that just sort of sets a bit of a different atmosphere there, rather than the old thump, whack, this, that, and the other. It's sort of the lights can come down a bit, and there's a little bit more sensitivity about that particular part of the set.
Yeah, Skylarking as an album has that sort of pastoral, gentle pop, sort of 60s pop feel for a lot of it, which is different as well. Any Dukes of Stratosphere?
No, we don't do any of that.
Do you like that? Have you listened to it?
To be honest, I've not really listened to it. I've heard bits and pieces, and it's a real 60s sort of psychedelic type of thing.
Right.
Which I actually, funnily enough, I think we were at the time Andy was thinking about this Dukes of Stratosphere thing. We were sort of arguing about what to call ourselves in that, and I think I did have a name, because I was originally supposed to be in that, and in the end, obviously, I left, and Dave Gregory's brother, Ian, played on the drums on that.
And John Leckie produced it, who produced Go To.
Well, I mean, it was right up John's alley, because John's an old hippie from way back, if he doesn't mind me saying so.
Sure.
Yeah, we get on very well, John and I, and in actual fact, we met at the This Is Pop documentary. There was a a premiere of that thing there. We went to London to see it, and John was there, and Hugh Pageant was there as well. And I hadn't seen John for a long time, and he said to me, "You sacked me from XTC." And I said, "No, I didn't, John. It was, and he was only having a go because he obviously didn't do the third record. He did the first two."
Right.
And it got to a point there where Virgin Records basically made the call on that, said, "Listen, we think it's best to have a change of direction because we haven't had a hit single off of this thing." So that was the reason for it. It was nothing to do with me saying, "I don't want to work with John Leckie anymore." I like John Leckie. I love John Leckie.
Yeah, he's done all right otherwise.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're still in touch even now, John. He's wishing us all the best on this tour. We get on extremely well. We have a curry periodically.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're in Swindon now.
Yeah.
All four of you are living in Swindon.
Yeah.
Do any of you see each other?
I haven't seen Colin since we sort of finished the TC&I thing there. I've seen Dave since. Dave came in and had a jam with us. I asked Dave if he wanted to join this thing, early on the piece. He didn't want to get involved in it because he felt that it was a poor man's version of XTC without Partridge.
Right.
He said if Partridge was involved, I'd get involved. But we had a jam, Dave and the rest of the guys, or Steve Tilling anyway, and we had a keyboard player who was temporarily in the band at the time during the transitional period when we were still looking for a guitar player. Dave came down, had a play, and we went through some of the old stuff. We had some good fun. But he didn't want to commit to it, so I asked him twice, and he didn't want to get involved. So that was that.
And Andy, you talked to him?
I talked to Andy. I talked to him. I emailed when we were on the UK part of the tour there because I said to Andy, I said, just jokingly, I said, "We're playing Liverpool tonight, Andy." I said, "Can you recommend a good hotel?" Because the last experience we had over there, we stayed in this shocking hotel that had nylon sheets, and all of us slept on top of the bed.
Oh, wow.
And it was... there's a funny story because when we went down to breakfast and all that, we had to share this breakfast. It was a plate of bacon in the middle there and 2 slimy eggs to share between the three of us. So Partridge can still remember this. And at the end of it, he said, "I remember this little freckle-faced kid coming down to the table saying, 'Me mam wants her money now.'" That is a Liverpudlian accent. Yeah, so he said, "Don't stay there whatever you do. For God's sake, man," he said, "don't stay at Cassin's Hotel," was the name of the place. And I said to him, I said, "No, we've managed to acquire better accommodation than Cassin's." So yeah, we've still got a good sense of humour between us, and we're still good friends.
He didn't come see you guys play, though.
No, he didn't. He was going to come to a rehearsal and have a look at that, but he spends a lot of time in a place called Rottingdean now, which is just outside of Brighton. He's got another house down there which is on the southeast coast of England, and he spends a lot of time down there now because his wife Erica doesn't like Swindon. She hates Swindon, and she's from New York.
Right.
So you can understand that. I mean,
do you think that he didn't see you because it would be too difficult for him, or just it just didn't work out?
I think he's a bit uncomfortable about doing it. I think just sort of being there and thinking that he might have to sort of talk to people.
Have you ever suggested to him, "Hey, look, I could play drums on some of your songs that you haven't been releasing"?
No, that's for him to ask me.
Interesting. So do you think there's any chance that XTC, the four of you, ever play together?
Well, as I said before, if I've achieved nothing else with this project, it's got them talking to each other. Whether it's favourably with this project or not, I don't know, but they're certainly talking to each other about this.
Who do you think is most sort of preventing that from happening?
Probably Colin.
Why?
You'll have to ask him that.
Because I got that sense, and when I talked to Dave Gregory also, I got the sense that there's something else. Not that I need to know all of your gossip or interpersonal relationships, but it seemed like there was something there that was not smooth with everyone.
I think that's the answer. I think.
That's it for episode 27 of Caropop. Thanks so much to Terry Chambers for his memories, insights, and music. EXTC plays dates in Boston and Toronto, then the band tours England. For more on XTC, please listen to Caropop episode 15 with Dave Gregory. That's 2 of the 4 prime XTC members covered here. So Andy Partridge and Colin Moulding, you're next. Thanks to web developer Marty Rosenbaum, and special thanks to Lou Carlozzo, who recorded this episode on location, as well as the Caropop theme. Caropop is produced by Chris Swake, who's always making plans. I'm Mark Caro. Please follow me on Twitter @MarkCaro, @MarkCaro, and visit the Caropop website, caropop.com, for posts about music, movies, and food, and also this Caropop podcast. Thanks.